People often ask me why I spend so much time talking about flat earthers when there are crazy ideas that have a far more negative impact on society. Creationists, for example, are much more effective at attacking science in the public sphere than flat earthers will ever be. Flat earthers at least come up with new ideas. Stupid ideas, but at least they're new. Creationists, on the other hand, had been using the same exact argument for centuries. Today, Quantum Eraser will be presenting Paley's Watch repackaged as Irreducible Complexity.
He is coming. Cover your butt.
Help fight the Flat Earth bots by giving this video a thumbs up and subscribe for weekly content. I'm not going to debunk irreducible complexity in this video. Far more eloquent people than me have already done that. Links in the description. The short and sweet of it is that irreducible complexity deliberately ignores the mechanisms of evolution while sprinkling on some argument from ignorance. Also, irreducible complexity isn't considered a real science by the scientific community, and rather than appearing in peer-reviewed papers, irreducible complexity only appears in creationist books and websites.
So for 10 years, I've asked these 3 simple questions to hundreds of intellectuals in the hallowed halls of academia. We're not talking about just the regular Joes here. All I've received eventually, even from them, was the tap dance, and they even started calling me names. Just from those 3 questions. You know something. Something's in the roost.
Quantum Eraser has spoken with unnamed intellectuals and outwitted them all. Sure, and I've dated several supermodels and left them all satisfied. What nonsense. The only way for Quantum Eraser to show up his intellect is not by showing his grasp a complex concept. It's not by holding himself to the same level of education as he demands of others. And it's most certainly not by going onto a live hangout to defend his ideas. No. Quantum Eraser shows off his intellect by boasting about unnamed intellectuals that he has outwitted. He's even driven them to do nothing more than name-calling. Good thing Quantum Eraser never engages in such behavior. If Quantum Eraser's comments are any indication, I'm certain that these unnamed intellectuals didn't start calling him names because they were backed into a corner, but rather because Quantum Eraser is a bit of an obnoxious dick.
We have Russell Doolittle. He's a professor of biochemistry at UC San Diego. He's the member of the National Academy of Sciences, and he's worked on blood clotting for 50 years. And at that point, he was the world's foremost expert on the subject. He published A Delicate Balance in Boston Review, which is published by MIT, and this is what he had to say. He said, recently the gene for Plasminogen, remember this one, we're going to be coming back to this, was knocked out of mice. Then the same workers knocked out the gene for Fibrinogen, another line of mice. And what do you think happened when these 2 lines were crossed? For all practical purposes, the mice lacking both genes were normal. Contrary to claims about irreducible complexity, see, he's talking about Behe right here, the entire ensemble of proteins are not needed. Music and harmony can arise from a smaller orchestra. That was beautiful. Dr. Doolittle, of course, is wrong and was referring to a paper that he apparently just skimmed through, as in just looked at the title, and not the whole title, but just loss of fibrinogen rescues mice.
There's a lot to unpack here, so brace yourselves. Let's start with what Dr. Doolittle is telling us. If irreducible complexity is correct, then there are some predictions we can make. If we take an irreducibly complex system and remove a piece, we would expect that system to fall apart. We'll know that that system isn't functioning by looking at the permanent product. Like error messages on a computer, we will end up with a list of malfunctions. If we remove one part of the system, we will end up with one list. And if we remove a different part, we will get a different list of malfunctions. The question is, what would happen if we remove both parts of the system at the same time? One would expect that we would get a combination of both lists, or a whole new list of malfunctions. Either way, one would think that having 2 parts missing would be worse than just having 1 piece missing. The study that Dr. Doolittle references does just that. 4 groups of mice were used in the study. A control group, a group that is plasminogen deficient, one that is fibrinogen deficient, and lastly, a group that is both plasminogen deficient and fibrinogen deficient. They then noted all pathologies or malfunctions they observed in the mice, and wrote them down in a handy-dandy list. Quantum Eraser has his own interpretation of this study.
From the author's abstract, mice deficient in plasminogen and fibrinogen are phenotypically indistinguishable from fibrinogen deficient mice. Listen, this is to say that the new line of mice that are missing both plasminogen and fibrinogen have all the problems of the fibrinogen missing line except thrombosis. Well, because plasminogen breaks the clots down after healing. So the blood doesn't clot, hemorrhage.
According to Quantum Eraser, the 2 lists of pathologies do combine, but because thrombi cannot exist without fibrinogen, they do not appear on mice that are fibrinogen deficient. We remove thrombi from the list and end up with just the pathologies of fibrinogen deficient mice. Of course, this isn't the whole story. Like I said earlier, the study provided a nice list of pathologies for each group of mice. Quantum Eraser very conveniently left out a few pathologies. The plasminogen deficient mice did not just suffer from thrombi, but had a host of other problems. Contrary to what Quantum Eraser wants you to believe, the plasminogen deficient mice were not just afflicted by thrombi. The list of pathologies for the plasminogen deficient mice include things like ulcers, lesions, and necrosis. But the excuse that Quantum Eraser is using only explains the lack of thrombi. Because Quantum Eraser's explanation does not match reality, Quantum Eraser has chosen to omit part of reality. And it gets better.
Female mice die during pregnancy. See all the other knockout gene studies that all resulted in offspring death. And these are mainly from Sue and Bugge here. So each time one factor was knocked out in each line, the respective offspring mice died. Very important point there. And it's exactly the point of irreducible complexity that Dr. Behe was illustrating. Moreover, and this is quite troubling, Professor Doolittle obviously didn't know, as evidenced by reviewing extremely superficially another study while being the world's foremost expert on the topic. What does that tell you?
Next, Quantum Eraser criticizes Dr. Doolittle for not doing his due diligence, and if he had done his due diligence, Dr. Doolittle would have noticed that other studies show that mice with missing factors cannot reproduce. After only a superficial reading, Quantum Eraser has found 4 studies that show that offspring of mice with missing factors die. Bugge et al. 1995 and 1996, and Sue et al. 1995 and 1998. Pause here for a second. Before I started writing my script, I reached out to Quantum Eraser to see if he was willing to share his presentation so that I could go through it in more detail. Quantum Eraser decided to be a dick about it, so any benefit of the doubt has been thrown out the window. Of the 4 studies that Quantum Eraser cites, only 3 are on the subject of blood coagulation. Sue et al. 1998 is titled The Shifting Basis of Life Satisfaction Judgments Across Culture, Emotions versus Norms. I get the sneaking suspicion that this has nothing to do with blood coagulation. Quantum Eraser didn't have enough papers to cite, so he just picked one at random and hoped that no one would check. But that's just me being a dick about it. Also, there appears to be 2 studies by Bugge in 1995. One makes no mention of survival of offspring in mice, but rather focuses on fertility. I will be ignoring this study since it neither backs up nor disproves Quantum Eraser's claim. Now, Quantum Eraser's claim is that every time one factor was knocked out in each line, the respective offspring died. The first study we will look at is Sue et al. 1995. In contrast, no litters could be generated from A alpha minus females, regardless of the genotype of their male partners and the genetic background of the breeding pair. Overt vaginal bleeding uniformly developed around day 10. These hemorrhagic events were fatal in 8 of these animals, with death occurring within 2 days after the appearance of the overt bleeding. At first glance, this seems to back up Quantum Eraser's claim, but simply reading the previous sentence proves him wrong. Breeding pairs consisting of A alpha plus minus females and either A alpha plus minus or A alpha minus minus males produce normal-sized litters with the expected number of fibrinogen A alpha minus minus offspring. It is A alpha minus minus females that cannot reproduce. A alpha plus minus females and A alpha plus minus or A alpha minus minus male can reproduce just fine. This already disproves Quantum Eraser's claim that every knockout offspring dies. But we're not done yet. Bugge et al. Has this to say. 2 test crosses between mates, both genotyped as PLG null, were also productive, with 4 to 5 PLG minus mice born. The generation of offspring from PLG minus parents is particularly significant in that it demonstrates clearly that PLG is not essential for the development to term. This isn't looking very good for Quantum Eraser. In the section called Combined UPAR and TPA Deficient Does Not Impair Fertility, Bugge et al. 1996 has this to say. These data indicate that both male and female UPAR TPA mice have excellent reproductive drive and success with little or no failure of pregnancy. Out of the 3 studies that Quantum Eraser cites, all 3 of them say the complete opposite of his claim. Quantum Eraser pretends to be better than the rest of us, but all of his talk just reveals how much of a hypocrite he is. He refuses to debate anyone without a PhD while he himself has none. He criticizes others for repeating points found on Wikipedia while he himself only answers comments by copy and pasting. He criticizes Dr. Doolittle for failing to scrutinize a study while proclaiming that only a superficial reading of a peer-reviewed paper proves that Dr. Doolittle is wrong. And yet, a close reading of these same studies show that Quantum Eraser isn't just wrong, but he's not even looking in the right direction. I'm going to end this video with an open invitation to Quantum Eraser to come onto my channel and talk about his ideas. Quantum Eraser is also welcome on GeoStreber's channel if he wants to talk to somebody who's not a dick.